I don't know about you, but I expected nothing but a loss for the Warriors, knowing that Steph Curry would not play in this game. First of all, I don't know what the heck is going on with Steph. I was really surprised to hear that he had an MRI taken last night. Like, what in the world? You don't take an MRI unless there is something structurally questionable. So that sounded a little... I don't even know what to think of it. But the good news is that it came back clean. We know that he's been wrapping ice around his knees. And the Warriors basically get 3 days off. Their next game isn't until Saturday now. So Steph will have some time off, rest up. Hopefully those knees will feel much better and fresh by Saturday. Having said that, the game started exactly how I thought it may go. 39-23. That's how the Warriors started this game. 39-23. It was basically the Andrew Wiggins show. He scored the team's first 11 points, but nobody else had it going. Kuminga was off to an awful start. Potts wasn't doing anything. Lindy just has no force to his game. And then the bench unit came in and wasn't much better at all. So it was looking like the game was going to get real ugly real soon. Until Pat Spencer came along and injected this great energy from the point guard position that the Warriors have desperately needed at that spot. And that just injected a whole new level of life back into the Warriors, and it became a game again. And then Kuminga started to turn up from the three-point line, and then Steve Kerr finally set something easy for him. If you guys remember that crazy dunk he had late in the second quarter. And on that drive, he ended up hurting Jalen Williams. I think he got raked in the face or something. I don't know exactly what happened to him, but he ended up missing the rest of this game. And OKC, just without him, didn't look like the same team. They had to overly rely on SGA. And they did a really good job of giving him a hard time, or as hard of a time as you can give him. And I gotta say, it was really nice to see Jonathan Kuminga kinda lock him up for 2 straight possessions. And in that second possession, obviously, with the shot clock running out, SGA decides to do something corny, and the refs, of course, reward him for it and giving Kuminga a foul on a classic bait call. Honestly, some of the stuff that SGA does, I just don't feel like that's really basketball, man. You're just cheating the game, and the NBA and the refs are just rewarding that cheating. And, well, if you want more watchability in the NBA, that's the kind of stuff that you gotta cut out. Remember when KD used to do the swipe all the time, and the league was like, okay, we can't give you a shooting foul for that. We're just gonna call that a non-shooting foul. They gotta start doing this with the foul baiting stuff that's going on. You're just manipulating the game into something that isn't really the game of basketball. And it's really disingenuous, and nobody's trying to watch that. The SGAs, the James Hardens, the Joel Embiids, these guys, they're not playing basketball, man. You're just taking trips to the free throw line. Anyway, that's just a pet peeve of mine. Kuminga scored 10 points in that second quarter. And from a scoring standpoint, he really injected some life into this team in a really positive way. And the defense, I mean, he had some good moments and he had some bad moments. But when he has to be more heavily relied upon to score the ball, and he's doing that for you, well, this is the kind of game where you can kind of live with some of those lapses from a defensive standpoint. But from a long-term standpoint, as a role player for this team, some of those lapses that he has dying on screens and stuff like this, these are the things that just cannot happen. You got to give him credit, because after that second quarter, going into the third quarter, he was still very aggressive, and Potts was also playing really well next to him. So I feel like those two guys really carried that third quarter, where the Warriors ended up outscoring OKC 33-22. Again, OKC missing such a vital piece in Jalen Williams. They were already missing Chet. They were also missing Caruso. So once again, they were an incomplete team. So it was really starting to look like the Warriors could steal this game. And then came the fourth quarter, and they scored 13 points in the first 6 minutes of the fourth quarter, which is really good. Slo-Mo was really good tonight, and it's about time that he had a good game. I like the combinations that he mostly played with, which was either Looney at the center next to him or Draymond at the center spot next to him. For whatever reason, he doesn't mesh well with Trace anytime those two guys are on the floor at the same time. I just haven't seen the best of results. I don't know if that has to do with some of the combinations at the guard spots or what the deal is. And needless to say, when it's Kuminga and Slo-Mo at power forward and center, that is just one of the worst combinations that you can play. So the really terrible combinations just weren't played. Looney was quite forceful from a defensive standpoint, hustle standpoint. He only shot 1 of 5 from the field, but it is what it is. Trace only got 4 minutes tonight coming off the bench because Steve decided to go with a different starting unit, needing more of a scoring punch. And, well, Those 4 minutes were all that was needed for Steve to decide that Trace was not fit for this game anymore, so he just didn't play again. And that just is what it is. Going back to the fourth quarter, again, the first half was really good. Pat Spencer, once again, providing impactful minutes. You know, in a game when the Warriors started 39-23, Pat Spencer was a +9 in this game. I think he runs the point guard position smoother than Paz, to be honest with you. And that really shouldn't be too surprising because Pat Spencer is 28 years old. The guy is basically in the prime years of his career. But obviously they cannot swap out Paz for Pat Spencer because you know what it is with the politics. I mean, that's just humiliating for the Warriors to do, right? To replace a guy that you wouldn't even trade for the likes of Lauri Markkanen in the offseason, and now you're going to replace him with Pat Spencer, a two-way contract player? Yeah, that's just not happening, right? Anyway, Paz came back into the game with about 6 minutes left. Kuminga came back with about 4.5 minutes left in the fourth quarter, and that was probably a mistake in the sense that, well, Kuminga really had it going in the last quarter and a half, and then you sat him for 7+ minutes, and then it's clutch time in the fourth quarter. He's coming in ice cold, and he really couldn't get it going again. Went 0 for 4 in the clutch minutes with a turnover, and Paz was just not really doing anything out there from a scoring standpoint, creating offense standpoint. Wiggins, after starting 3 of 4 from the field, went on to shoot 1 of 11 for the rest of the game. Tough scene. And you know, in all these clutch games, Steve just doesn't seem to know who to go to. He keeps flopping back and forth between this player and that player, and I just feel like nobody can really get into a rhythm. And this brings us back to the fact that even with Steph Curry out, even with the fact that Melton is no longer in rotation, Steve still somehow managed to run a 12-man rotation. You think maybe Kuminga would have finished the game a little bit better if he ultimately had more minutes. I mean, he's in the starting lineup, so if you're gonna start him, then give him the proper minutes. I say this about Trace all the time as well. If you decide to start somebody, make sure that that player gets the proper opportunity that he's earned if you put him in the starting lineup. But again, when 12 guys are in rotation, guys can only get so many minutes. Guys can only get into so much of a rhythm. Kyle Anderson, for as well as he was able to play tonight, played no more than 17 minutes. Moses Moody plays 13 minutes, goes 0 for 4, scoreless. Lindy Waters, 1 for 7 from the field, was essentially useless tonight and was just killing the team down the stretch. The guy was throwing up air balls. And I don't know, to be fair to him, I think the shot clock was winding down on some of those shots. But still, some of them he was open and he's just not ready to come through. So I don't know what else Steve needs to see in order to determine that he needs to get a little tough and sit out some players that probably deserves to be in rotation. But that's what the depth is for, man. You have depth. There are some guys that deserve to play that won't be able to play. And then eventually and inevitably, somebody will get hurt. And then they'll be the next man up and they'll get the opportunity. This is how NBA hierarchy and depth chart works. When they talk about a deep team, that's what it's supposed to be. Just because you have a deep team, it doesn't mean you should feel the need to play everybody. I'll give you a really good example. Amir Coffey of the Clippers. Anytime that he's had an opportunity to play for this team for the last few years, I feel, he's been really productive for them as a fill-in player. But anytime they have a full depth of guys in their rotation, Amir Coffey goes back to the end of the bench and doesn't get any playing time. That is the nature of certain guys' role for deep and serious teams. That's what Mike Dunleavy got Lindy Waters for. Not for Steve to be like, oh, but he's good enough to play, so I'm just going to play him anyway. So the question now is, who do you sit out? All right, we've seen a pretty good sample size of a lot of guys in rotation. And this is pretty tough. I understand why Steve is struggling to make whatever move he needs to make. But you have some redundant guys in that rotation, and you just got to sit some of them out. I would say the 3 guys he needs to consider the most are Lindy Waters, Buddy Hield, and Moses Moody. You need to take those 3 guys, pick one, sit the other 2, run a 10-man rotation. Obviously, there's some complications there because when Steph Curry comes back, Steve's going to want to keep Lindy in the starting lineup as the 2 guard. And the thing about it is that starting unit with Steph Curry, Lindy Waters, Andrew Wiggins, Draymond, and Trace, they currently have a net rating of 8 now that we have a pretty decent sample size of them playing. So they are a net positive, and they yield good results more times than not. But at the same time, it's time to come to a decision. See, the thing about Moses Moody in that starting lineup is that instead of Lindy Waters, is that the net rating with Moody in that lineup instead of Lindy is like Negative 69, something preposterous. I think that happened from the Celtics game because Moody started that game and he just was not good, not connected, inconsistent. And this is the problem with Moody. Sometimes he's good, sometimes he's not. But also, like he said after the last loss, he's not had the privilege of getting a chance to build his rhythm into a game because his role is constantly being yo-yoed left and right. If he doesn't get off to a good start, he just might not play again. And Lindy, at the end of the day, is not really closer caliber, I feel. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think he's on a non-guaranteed contract. Maybe they need to give him a look. But then again, you do have Buddy, who's getting paid like 12, 13 mil per year. Maybe he can give you more consistent overall results if he was actual consistent 6-man minutes, like 25 to 27 minutes per game. And then maybe he'll give you so much offense that he'll make up for some of the deficiencies from a defensive standpoint. But maybe that looks better if you sit one of the guards and then just surround him with better defenders overall so that the limitations of his defense isn't so pronounced. You know, when Steve does these things where you're putting Buddy Hield next to Lindy Waters or Moses Moody at the same time, well, you're just running redundant guys at the same time. And it's almost like they're competing for shots. It's such a headache. There's no question about it. The Warriors need to go and consolidate for a trade to get rid of some of these redundant pieces and bring some pieces back that are more reliable. I'm having a tough time believing that the Warriors are going to be able to gun for a championship with so many young players on the roster. Confidence constantly comes and goes. Their play is constantly inconsistent, and Steve is absolutely not helping in that regard. At the end of the day, it was a valiant effort by the young guys. But I suppose this is a glimpse of what the future can look like when Steph Curry's gone. Again, I'm not going to be overly upset about the Warriors losing to the OKC Thunder without Steph Curry. But the one that will continue to haunt them is the fact that they lost to the Spurs and the Nets after relinquishing giant leads against those teams. If they had taken care of those games like they should have, they'd be 14-4 right now instead of 12-6. Great and elite teams are able to stay atop by taking care of the mediocre and the less than mediocre teams. And as soon as the Warriors revert and having to overly compete against those types of teams, that's when they become a mediocre team. Because that's what mediocre teams do. And with the Rockets taking care of business tonight, they are now in the second seed ahead of the Warriors. The Warriors are a game back from them, and they're only a half game ahead of the Grizzlies now. And here's something even crazier. They are only 2.5 games back from being out of the play-in picture. That's how tight things are in the Western Conference, and that is why it has been completely and utterly unacceptable to watch Steve Kerr be so casual about these games that he should absolutely be taken care of, and he failed to do so, and he's failing to do it time and time again this season, just blowing 30-point leads multiple times. You blow a 30-point lead maybe once every 2 to 3 years. You don't do it 2-3 times in the span of the first 17 games. And then needless to say, they've blown a bunch of 20-point leads and leads in the high teens late into the third quarter, where your winning percentage at that point should be something in the 90% range. Of course, there's plenty of season left, but right now, the vibes are totally gone. The Warriors are reeling. They've lost 3 straight games. To be honest with you, they should be on a 4-game losing streak. They should have lost that Pelicans game as well. The only reason they didn't was because Wiggins had an incredible game. And to be honest with you, at this point, things are looking so down. Players are looking so inconsistent. I don't know what's next. But the one thing that was encouraging is that their defense was very forceful tonight. And that was nice to see. But until at the very least Steve figures out this 12-man rotation stuff and cut it down, I think the Warriors are going to continue to struggle and continue to be uncertain in closing situations, and Steve just scrambling and not knowing who to play. Sorry, man, but that kind of indecisive coaching is not going to get you very far, and it's certainly not going to have you playing anything close to one of the most elite teams in the league like they were doing in the earlier part of the season. I would say the biggest solution moving forward is once again to go back to the stats-based offense and give the starters more of an opportunity to really put their imprint into the game. We'll see what happens. The Warriors get a few days off, like I said. I'm going to be using that time to make a couple of fundamental videos in which I discuss, one of them being, I'm going to be using that time to post a fundamental video explaining which player belongs in which position so that we all can get a better sense as to how Steve can come up with better combinations that have better overall balance all the way around from a defensive standpoint and offensive standpoint. So stay tuned for that. Take a deep breath. You're going to get some time off. Take care of yourselves. Happy Thanksgiving. Enjoy your time with family and friends. And we will reconvene soon enough. Thank you so much for watching. As always, until next time.